Bosses of Reddit, what is the worst thing you have ever seen on a CV? Stains. Get your shit together, people. Very best CV. Added a hobby section which was their only thing on the second page, and all it said was, I used to like making models, but I don't do it much over the last 3 years. One time, a woman submitted her CV with a history that went all the way back to a science fair prize she won in 5th grade. No joke. Then some spelling bee she won in 8th grade, and on and on and on. And every single one of her equestrian competitions. And pictures, they were actual photographs, not links. This was in the late 90s, of her cheerleading squad. The whole package she sent in was about 20 pages long. I'd have tossed it, but it was hilarious, so I read the entire thing, and it made its way all around the office. It was a marketing job, so I have no idea what she thought her 5th grade science project had to do with it. Needless to say, she didn't get an interview, but I'm sure it would have been a fun one. People who claim attention to detail as one of their greatest strengths yet have spelling mistakes all over their CV. The background of the resume consisted of a glamour shot of the applicant wearing a very low-cut blouse. I didn't see the CV, but I was called as a reference on a person who I had fired for rifling through my desk after hours. After I fired her, she called my house and threatened to burn it down. Then she lists me as a reference on her next job. She didn't get it. One of my coworkers, a copywriter, received a 10,000-word My Little Pony fanfiction as a writing sample. That his father was an influential general in the Pakistan army. If you think that helps you get a job in Canada, you're not going to fit in. Not a boss, but a colleague at a place I used to work at asked me to look over her CV, skimmed over name and address, read over the rest of the CV, and was about to say yeah, looks good to me. Then her email address caught my eye. NHLSAGOAL69@. After a few minutes of staring at the email address in disbelief, I turned and asked if that was her only email address she had to use. Yeah, why, what's wrong, was the reply. By then the whole team had looked at it and was losing their shit over the email address. We did manage to convince her to create a new email address that was her first name, surname instead. It was a horribly formatted, and by that I mean not at all, extremely non-specific resume. It included basic knife skills. I understand that that might be a good thing to have on a resume for food service, but I work in it. Not on a CV, but I recall a guy who had done a third-party psychological profile of some sort. For some reason he chose to attach it. There was nothing about it that looked particularly impressive or relevant, but it mentioned something about problems controlling anger and great difficulty working in teams with other people. He was applying for a position as a sales manager. Why he chose to attach the report beats me completely, but I'm glad he did. We had a guy applying for a job in our shipping department. He stated he was fired from his last job for writing God Bless America on a crate going to Abu Dhabi. Received a CV with nothing on it other than basic personal info and a picture of the guy's new boat. It was a nice boat though. Images. Worst thing I've seen recently was a hobbies section that only included the line, I'm very interested in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Okay. Applicant included their religion and where they went on a church mission. Not what they did or how the experience might be applicable to the job. Just that it happened like 20 years ago. They were obviously expecting to gain favor for their religious affiliation. It actually had the opposite effect. I work with consultants, so I have probably reviewed over 2,000 plus resumes in the last 5 years. The worst, the absolute worst, was this guy I actually felt really bad for, but who had no business putting the personal news he did on his resume. He had a 1-year gap on his resume that he marked as a sabbatical. Okay, fine, but you're a consultant, so no one really cares. But it went into the reasons for the sabbatical, which were, I'm paraphrasing, to deal with the grief occasioned by the death of my wife and partner of 30 plus years. I also took the time to pursue legal action against the surgeon for the sequence of errors that led to her untimely death. Yikes. Bud, I feel bad for you, but you don't need that on your resume. Had someone rank their skills by giving themselves a star rating. If you give yourself 5 stars and see you better be Brian Kernan or the ghost of Dennis Ritchie, cause to me that sounds like you think you know it inside and out. Had a man apply for a factory labor position where he would be required to lift automobile wheels all day. Entire CV was in Hello Kitty pink font. There are tons of terrible resumes I have seen. My favorite was in this girl's achievements section. First in my family to graduate high school without getting pregnant. Clinically diagnosed as a psychopath. Not the worst thing ever, but I've seen a lot of them with curriculum vitae or resume blasted in 72-point font across the top of their resume, much larger than their name, or, well, anything else on the page. I recycle most of them. I know what I'm looking at. About 25 years ago, I was on the hiring committee for a marketing job. We literally got a resume in crayon, not creative crayon drawings, to illustrate a playful grasp of marketing essentials. The applicant wrote out a standard resume in crayon. I had a girl write marital status, single as her first qualification. Hobby section that listed furry cosplay. That was a bit too much info. At my previous job, at a restaurant, a girl walked in to apply. First of all, she walked in with shopping bags, as if she just went on a shopping spree. Then, when my manager asked her, "Do you have a CV?" she said the legendary words I will never forget. "I'm the CV. I know it all by heart, so anything you want to know, you can ask me." She said this like it was a brilliant idea nobody thought about before. Like, no shit. Of course you know your CV by heart. It's a summary of your life. As this was going on, me and my colleague were placing bets. How long she would last if they hired her. I said first week. He said after first week. Unfortunately we'll never know as she didn't get hired. I had a guy who wrote that he was in the 1% of spelling and math geniuses in the world for a delivery driver job. From a variety of places I've worked as a hiring manager. One woman listed this under her accomplishments. "I was doing great until I got pregnant, and I had no idea what was slowing me down until I took a test. I told my manager and she fired me." One person listed their previous job duties as, "I did everything that needed to be done." Another person wrote in all caps, "I'm attention to detail, and I want to be a veterinary. It's what I'm going to school for." The worst one I remember seeing listed only the following as their work history: babysitting, 2 months. Ice cream shop, 3 months. Babysitting, 4 months. That was literally it. No further details of where she'd actually worked. Really, ice cream shop. No name, or when she worked. No educational info. I assumed she was just out of high school, but who knew? Just a name and phone number. We did not call her. I'm not a boss, but I read a CV over my boss's shoulder once. It was handed in by a young girl who couldn't have been older than 16, and the introduction paragraph was basically her going on about how she wouldn't be gaining a job, the job would be gaining her, and she expected to move quickly up the company's ranks because anything less would be a waste of her skill and talent. She sounded so obnoxious and stuck up that I was never happier when my boss chucked the whole 5-page monstrosity in the bin. When I was interning for a bank, my boss tasked me with the responsibility of reading resumes and picking people to interview. Keep in mind this is a job that will pay at least 6 figures. I printed out a huge stack of every resume that was sent to us for this job. A lot of people had great experience, some people were reaches, and then one was just terrible. It was a picture of a guy to fill his game with the text underneath "Hire me." He applied online without any contact info, which is confusing, since in order to log in the portal you use an email. I showed my boss and we both wanted to bring him in just to see, but we couldn't. Bowers sent me a resume they wanted me to look at. It was one of those word template deals, but he didn't fill in all the prompts, so there would be spots where it would say insert experience or whatever. Bonus was that it was from a guy I had worked with a couple of years before in a state 800 miles away. The guy was a total office power tripping a shat. No interview was offered. His boss may have found out. Also in a shat. When I managed a Dunkin' Donuts, we fired one baker and hired another, this weird loner/stoner kid. He set all of my creeper vibes off, but he was good at his job, so I consoled myself with the fact that he worked nights and I worked days, so I'd only have to see him for maybe an hour a day, if that. Part of my job was reviewing the cameras during the times I wasn't there. I sat down one afternoon after the rush to review the cameras. I selected my time and settled in. Around 2 am donut time, I watched as the new baker picked up a bunch of pre-shaped bagels, smashed them together into one big dough ball, stuck his finger in the dough, and made an opening. He pressed the trigger on the jelly stuffer, lubricated himself, and proceeded to fuck the dough. After he had finished, I watched him wash the jelly of his dick, and then he washed the jelly and not jelly off the batter, lay it out, cut bagels out of it, and then bake them. And then they were put in the bakery case, where we sold them to customers. I reviewed footage from his first nights, and watched him lubricate himself with donut filling, and fuck the dough, 7 straight days, and then bake and sell the things he'd violated. After I finished vomiting, I waited for him to show up that night, showed him the footage and fired him. He didn't understand why he was being fired, or why it was wrong, since the ovens would have killed any biological matter on the batter. I had a high school kid who was definitely the nerdy type include his senior photo for me, braced face and all. Applicant for an administration position at a bank, mentioned sports in his interests/hobbies section and added 1.5 page of his photos from swimming pool/competitions, with some of them with no t-shirt on to show his abs. That was weird. My boyfriend got a crazy CV in where it looked like this guy just basically used a thesaurus every third word to describe very mundane jobs like being a lot loader at Home Depot. It was insane and absolutely hilarious. I begged him to interview the guy for shits and giggles so I could hear what he was like in person, but he wouldn't do it. Well, a couple weeks later he told me the guy showed up in person to follow up on his application and the guy was not at all like he was on the CV. I was kind of disappointed to hear that. It was the most hilarious thing I've seen, but not on the CV. An applicant emailed their CV with their name appearing as your mum in our inbox. The CV wasn't bad, but given that we all did nothing but laugh about it that day, there was no way anyone could have handled interviewing them. Not a boss, but a section like this: beginner level at Greek, beginner level at Turkish, beginner level at French, beginner level at Mandarin, beginner level at Japanese. I'm nimble and possess a wiry strength. He was applying for a developer position on my team. Like, WTF did he think went into writing code? I never had my hobby on a CV. Keeping venomous snakes ISN backquote too much appealing to most people. My current nanny listed her mother as a referee. Luckily I knew the other people she listed so could take their word. We had a section on the application: have you ever been convicted of a felony? If yes, please describe the nature of the incident. Now we hired basically anybody, even non-violent sex predators and murderers. Gas station. But one response that gave me pause was a guy who angrily scribbled out the entire section with a black pen. This same man had once followed me to my home, threatened my customers and employees, and tried to steal regularly. He was not given an interview. Anyone on JSA in the UK might remember the work programs etc. being handed out like candy in an attempt to get people into any damn job. Didn't matter if they could do the work or not. I was put on one where it was decided that my CV needed touching up by an professional. It was returned to me with no less than 3 different fonts and font sizes, half-done address, uneven spacing and other issues that I can't remember. Currently 3 people that run CV workshops are using it as an example of a bad CV.